Steve Martin, the silver-haired comedy legend with a banjo in one hand and razor-sharp wit in the other. For decades, he's charmed audiences as one of Hollywood's most beloved entertainers. From The Jerk to Father of the Bride, his blend of absurdity, intelligence, and slapstick carved out a permanent place in American humor. But here's the part audiences never saw. Behind that warm smile and gentle demeanor lurked a perfectionist. A man with exacting standards, little patience for mistakes, and even less tolerance for colleagues who didn't measure up. Martin wasn't just chasing laughs, he was engineering them. Every pause, every gesture, every punchline was calculated like clockwork, and anyone who disrupted his precision, they landed on a quiet blacklist of actors he refused to work with again. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on Steve Martin's hidden rivalries. 7 actors he clashed with so intensely, Hollywood insiders say, the tension still lingers decades later. Stay with me, because the gentle genius of comedy may not have been so gentle after all. On screen, Steve Martin, Chevy Chase, and Martin Short looked inseparable in Three Amigos. The 1986 comedy became a cult classic, filled with goofy songs, elaborate costumes, and quotable lines. Fans saw a trio of bumbling heroes. Behind the cameras, though, it was a battlefield. Steve Martin approached comedy like a surgeon, every beat rehearsed, every movement timed. Chevy Chase. He thrived on chaos, improvising lines, going off script, testing everyone's patience. Director John Landis once described it as watching fire meet ice. Steve meticulously plotted scenes, then Chevy would waltz in and improvise something completely different. By the 7th ruined take, Martin allegedly snapped, "Either he follows the script, or I walk." Though the director smoothed things over, the clash lingered. At a comedy awards ceremony years later, Martin made a thinly veiled jab. If ego were money, Chevy could buy Wall Street. It got a laugh. But insiders knew it wasn't a joke. 2 comedy titans, both at the height of their careers, had collided. And the scars never fully healed. And if Martin thought Chase's chaos was infuriating, his encounters with Jim Carrey took things to another level. By the 1992, a new king of comedy had risen: Jim Carrey. Wild, unpredictable, physically explosive. Where Martin relied on precision, Carrey relied on madness. And when these two worlds met, sparks flew. At the 1995 American Comedy Awards, Carrey hijacked the stage. What was supposed to be a short introduction turned into a rambling stream of consciousness performance that dragged on for minutes. The audience laughed at first, then shifted in their seats as the bit went nowhere. The cameras cut to Steve Martin. He yawned theatrically, glanced at his watch, and waited. Later, when Martin took the stage, he carried an oversized "Wrap It Up" sign, the kind producers flash when a speech runs too long. The audience roared, but the message was sharp. Industry insiders say Martin refused multiple projects with Carrey. His biting remark, "I'd rather act opposite a tornado. At least with a natural disaster, you know which way it's going to spin." It wasn't hatred, it was philosophy. Martin saw comedy as mathematics. Carrey saw it as jazz, both brilliant, but completely incompatible. And if Carrey's freeform antics drove Martin mad, Bill Murray once pushed him to his breaking point on live television. It was 1978. Steve Martin was one of Saturday Night Live's most beloved recurring hosts. Bill Murray was the rising star with a reputation for brilliance and volatility. During rehearsals for a sketch, Murray showed up late and uninterested. Martin was punctual, prepared, and furious. When the live show began, things unraveled. Murray improvised new lines, mocked Martin's delivery, even mimicked his voice. To viewers, it looked like comedy. To Martin, it was sabotage. Backstage, Martin reportedly confronted him. "Comedy is a partnership, not a hijacking." Murray laughed it off, telling him to lighten up. The result? A decade-long freeze. The two avoided working together despite countless opportunities. When they finally reunited years later, Insiders said the chill between them was impossible to miss. Lorne Michaels summed it up years afterward. Steve values structure. Bill thrives on disruption. Two geniuses completely out of sync. But Martin's clashes weren't limited to improv wildcards. Even the famously polite Steve Carell found himself at odds with Martin's strict methods. On paper, Steve Martin and Steve Carell seemed like a perfect match. Both intellectual comedians, both respected for their craft. But during the 2011 film The Big Year, tensions quietly boiled. At table reads, Carell riffed freely, tossing out alternate lines and experimenting with delivery. Martin came in with dialogue memorized, motivations analyzed, performance locked in. Carell's spontaneity knocked him off balance. At one point, Martin pulled the director aside. "Is this a script reading or a writing session? Because I prepared for the former." The two remained professional, but distance was obvious. During press tours, Martin was paired with Jack Black instead of Carell, and afterward, they never worked together again. Subtle but telling. Even nice guy Carell couldn't survive Martin's exacting standards. And if Carell represented the modern improviser, Adam Sandler embodied something Martin despised, even more juvenile comedy. Steve Martin came from the counterculture scene of the 1970 seconds, blending philosophy and absurdity into an art form. His comedy had layers, irony, wit, subtlety. Adam Sandler? He built an empire on yelling, slapstick, and man-child tantrums. Hugely successful, but to Martin, it represented everything comedy shouldn't be. In a 2003 interview, Martin dropped a line many saw as a shot at Sandler. "I love wit. Slapstick is fine, but some things are just noise in a wig." When studios once suggested Sandler for a co-star role, Martin allegedly brushed it off. "We're making different kinds of movies. Two legends. Two completely different leagues." But Martin's disapproval wasn't just personal. When SNL itself sank into mediocrity in the early 1980 seconds, Martin nearly cut ties altogether, and one cast member, Joe Piscopo, took the brunt of it. The early 1980 seconds are often called SNL's dark years. Lorne Michaels had left, and the show struggled with a new cast. Among them, Joe Piscopo. Known for his muscle-bound Frank Sinatra impression, Piscopo was everywhere. Martin returned to host during this period and sat through rehearsals. According to writers, he looked visibly pained. After one of Piscopo's sketches, Martin muttered, "Is this what the show is now?" Behind the scenes, he requested changes. By the time Lorne Michaels returned, Martin reportedly said, "Not with that guy," when asked to host again. And sure enough, he didn't come back until after Piscopo was gone. To Martin, bad comedy wasn't just unfunny, it was offensive. A betrayal of what SNL once stood for. But the most famous rivalry of all wasn't with an improviser or a rookie. It was with a superstar who was on his way to becoming comedy's biggest name. Across decades, a pattern emerges. Steve Martin didn't feud out of ego alone. He clashed with anyone whose approach to comedy clashed with his own. Chevy Chase, Jim Carrey, Bill Murray, Steve Carell, Adam Sandler, Joe Piscopo, Eddie Murphy. Different eras, different styles, but one common thread: Martin's relentless pursuit of perfection. To him, comedy was architecture, precision, timing, control. To others, comedy was chaos, instinct, improvisation. Neither approach is wrong. But together, oil and water. So was Steve Martin protecting comedy's highest standards, or just protecting his own ego? That's the question Hollywood still whispers about. And maybe, just maybe, the real Steve Martin is as complex and as controversial as any of the characters he played.